Are you thinking about taking the leap from maybe a corporate job or some sort of full-time job or responsibility to full-time blogging? If so, this interview is a must listen. I talked to Jess Vogl from This Jess Cooks, and she tells us her whole story about leaving her corporate job in PR and marketing and going to full-time blogging. And it was quite an adventure for her. She tells you, if you are thinking of doing the same thing, about how to create a plan to make the leap, different ways to utilize skills that maybe you had in your corporate job or your other job that you can bring over into blogging, how to create systems in your business right off the bat so you are all set to go, and talking about some mindset shifts to make too. So going from thinking that you're always a newbie to having the confidence to do this and to really own it. And then last but not least, we talk about never stop learning, never stop growing, never stop having that mindset that you're open to new things coming your way. This is really a valuable conversation, even if you are not currently thinking of taking a leap. Maybe you already are a full-time blogger. Still tune in because there are such good nuggets here that I think everyone is going to pull out. I really hope you love this episode. It is number 710. I would love to learn a little bit about your blog. So This Jess Cooks is your blog, right? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so This Jess Cooks is a blog sharing simple baking and sourdough discard recipes, mostly sourdough discard. All of my recipes can also be made with active sourdough starter, but I really started working with I made a sourdough starter during COVID. Didn't we all? Like, isn't that what everybody did? So, so I made a starter during COVID, and as I was doing it, I was so frustrated by it didn't work the first time. I did not succeed. And I had to throw away so much of it every time I fed it. And I was like, I have to cut this thing in half. And I'm literally throwing away all this time and these ingredients, basically, that I have just put into this for 2 weeks to try to get this thing off the ground. And I was just so frustrated by that. So I started making discard recipes just sort of out of my own frustration and need for them, and started sharing them on my blog. I mean, my blog prior to that was a bit general, like it was dairy-free recipes, but it was sort of everything. And this started giving me some real structure and real direction, which, I've just taken it and ran since, and it's been really fun. And I'm not bored at all. And friends and family are always like, you're in a niche of a niche. Don't you feel a little restricted? And I'm like, frankly, I don't. Like, it feels actually really, really roomy in here. So, it's been a really fun journey.
That's such a great niche to have because, since COVID, this has become a big thing. It's become a niche for sure. So you started your blog before COVID. When did you initially start it?
My blog has gone through many iterations. I think there's probably a lot of people who have that story. I think originally it was like a travel journal when I was in, certainly when I was in college, I was blogging travel stuff, but it was mostly like family and friends reading, what I'm doing while I'm studying abroad kind of thing. And then eventually it started dipping its toe into food and sort of restructured a little bit towards dairy-free recipes, and then started restructuring a little bit towards baking, and then ended up going down a sourdough discard route. So the first post, was probably in 2008.
Okay.
But it was something completely different. It was more of like a diary online, if you will.
Yeah, it's an evolution, I think, for most of us. If it's not, I think it's pretty unique to not be an evolution.
Yeah.
So, well, that's great. So during COVID, when you really went into this niche, you had a job, correct? You had a full-time corporate job?
Yeah, so I was working in corporate PR and communications at a food company in Chicago. So it was, it was interesting because on paper it was like my dream job. It's exactly what I wanted to be doing. I did it. I was like, I'm here. I'm doing the thing. This is where I want to be. And at the same time, it wasn't as shiny as I thought it would be once you get there. So it just wasn't like living up to my expectations for what it was going to be. And then frankly, COVID hit and that changed my job a lot. It became crisis comms and COVID comms and a lot of just like, stuff that's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do lifestyle and food PR, and we're sitting there talking about, disease rates around the world.
Yeah.
So it was just sort of declining and getting less interesting for me at work. And at the same time, I was doing food photography as, a creative outlet. I was doing blogging as a creative outlet. I was starting to take on some clients, like as little side gigs here and there. And that was actually going really well. I remember having a month where I was still working full time in comms, and I did $7,000 of side gig, like freelance food photography work that month. And I had this moment where I was like, okay, hold on. Like, that's not nothing. And if I
Yeah.
did that while still working a full-time corporate job, what can I do if I put all my effort into this and put all my time and attention and like really tried to learn and all that stuff. So that's sort of when the seeds started to get planted. My corporate job was just getting less and less fulfilling for me, and my sort of side work was getting more and more fulfilling, and I was starting to see like, hey, there's a world over here and it's real and there's money to be made, and like this could be a real job. I
Yeah.
certainly had all, friends and family who were like, are you sure? Are you sure? Can you make money doing
Yes.
this?
Of
The
course.
first
Yeah.
conversations with my parents are like, you're going to leave your job and you're going to,
Yeah.
but it
I
was
think
tough
that's a
because
common conversation that a lot of us
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
And when you're sitting in a really nice role, it's
I
hard
know.
to leave. It's comfortable, right? Like you went to school for this. You've been in this industry for however many years. You're making a good salary. You have benefits, like all that stuff. It's very comfortable. And it's obviously very uncomfortable to say, hey, that's not enough anymore. And I'm going to go do something maybe a little crazy.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
But really, I mean, on paper, it's uncomfortable, but it's
Yeah.
really like in retrospect, making the leap myself many years ago,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it was so uncomfortable and unconventional,
Hmm.
but it makes perfect sense that I did it because
Yeah.
like look at the freedom and the everything that has opened up for me and my life and my
Yeah.
family. Like, yes, it was right, but at the time it feels like on paper I'm making this. I have this
Yeah.
for benefits. I have health
Yeah.
insurance, blah blah blah. It's such a hard decision to make and to actually take the leap.
And it's a huge identity shift.
Absolutely.
You're here, you're like, oh, I'm a trained professional. I've been doing this for a decade of experience in XYZ. And now you're going to be like, oh, I have, no experience. I don't know what I'm doing. But,
Right?
that's just sort of the villain thoughts going through your mind.
Yeah, a lot
But
of
yeah, I mean,
mindset stuff
totally a lot
involved
of
and wrapped
mindset
up in there.
stuff. But like you
Yeah.
said, it also just felt really right. Like
Yes.
it didn't feel like I was going against the grain. Like it felt a little scary, sure, but it felt really good. And every time I had even just like a small win or a small learning or something, something would get unlocked for me and I'd be like, this is so cool. And it just like kept doing that. And so that to me that's where I was like, all right, I'm going in the right direction. Like this isn't going to
Yes.
be a totally straight line here, but at least I'm like moving in the general path that feels really fulfilling for me. I feel like I'm good at this and can be good at this, and I think that this can be real.
Yeah, I love that you did that, just following like one it's literally one step at a time sometimes, just like, okay, this
Yes.
feels right, I'm gonna go there. Okay, now this feels right, I'm gonna keep going
Yeah.
there. Even though it's really hard to do that because
And
you
in a
do have people.
creative
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In a creative field, I think you have to feed that creative energy. So even
for
if you're like,
sure.
all right, this is maybe a little bit of a side step, maybe this is a little side quest here, but like if that's going to fuel your creative energy, then like absolutely go and do that thing and come back and you're going to have this new energy for whatever is your sort of main focus.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I know there are a lot of people listening who are in a boat that you were in and I was in a long time ago,
Mhm.
where it's like I have the safe space, but this feels right. How do
Yeah.
I and when do I pursue it? Do you have thoughts for them as far as like creating a plan, like when to
Totally.
actually take the leap?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things that will set a really good foundation for you. One is talking with your partner, your spouse, your parents, your friends, whoever is sort of your support system in your life, and talking to them and saying, "Hey, I want to do this, and this is my plan," and getting them on board, ideally. Obviously, you're going to want them to be in your corner and to be, you're going to call them when you're frustrated or stressed or uncertain, and you want them to be supportive of what you're doing. um, Especially for me, so I'm married, my husband was a big factor in this. I needed him to be comfortable with this jump as well. So I made a business plan and I presented it to him, and I was like, look, here's what I'm going to do. I want you to know that I'm not just like willy-nilly flying by the seat of my
Yeah.
pants. There's a little bit of that, but like there is structure here and these are my goals. So that was really important to me to get him on board, which he was immediately. He was like, yep, done, let's do it. um, I think another thing is just saying your plans out loud, or your goals or your dreams. I mean, we've all heard that in many different ways in our lives, but it is a very real and powerful thing. It's somewhat easy to have a dream in your head and never voice it. And then it's easier to ignore it if it didn't happen or if you didn't really go for it or whatever. So I think voicing that out loud to people is going to hold you accountable a little bit and hopefully get you excited and hopefully get other people excited. So talk about it. Talk about it with your friends. Talk about it with your support system. And then think about what you need to feel comfortable to make the jump. So for me, like I said, I made a business plan, and I said, here are my goals, here is my timeline, and here is my when I'm going to call it. It wasn't an open ended forever thing. I said, I gave myself a 6 month runway. So I said, okay, here, I think it was like June-ish. I said, all right, I'm going to quit my job at the end of the year. From here till the end of the year, in these next 6 months, I'm going to get certain things together. I'm going to establish my LLC. I'm going to get my blog together. I'm going to create business cards. I'm going to make a portfolio site. I'm going to save money. I mean, that was a real thing. Um, think about health insurance. I mean, some of these
Mm.
like back end business logistics. So I had 6 months to do that and also take some courses. I think I took some photography courses. I listened to some summits during that time. So just take sorry, take the opportunity to
Yeah.
learn. So I had 6 months, or I gave myself 6 months to get it together, basically. And then I quit at the end of the year. And then I said, all right, I have 1 year. I'm giving myself 1 year to test this out. And if it doesn't work, so what? It's 1 year. I'll go back to corporate jobs. A 1 year gap is not going to hurt me on my, corporate career
Yeah.
of my life. So I think that was important too, was having like, when am I going to do it? And when do I need to make the decision as to like, is this flying or not? And I had very clear metrics, I guess, of like, what does it mean? When are we making it, right? Like, what do I need to achieve to make it? So a big one, a lot of times, people think they need to replace their salary. Maybe true, maybe not true. Just think about like what number, if it is a financial goal, what number do you need to feel comfortable? You might not be replacing your salary 100% in that first year, and that's okay. Or maybe you do, and that's awesome. But don't, like, if that's such a huge hurdle for you, and you say, if I can make whatever that number is for you, if I can make $25,000 this year, or if I can make $50,000 this year, or whatever, call that your number and be like, all right, once we hit that, then we know this is working, which is really important. And luckily I hit my goal and I'm still
Oh,
here. So
yay. Oh, that's so good. So when you created that financial goal, did you did you define how you would attain that? So was it like,
mm.
blog revenue or ad revenue or just anywhere in the business?
So I did not necessarily say where the money needed to come from. When I quit my job, my blog was not monetized. I was not making money
Hmm.
through an ad network. Um, I didn't monetize my blog till 2023. So I was making money through freelance photography, a little bit of sponsored content, and I actually sort of took my main gig, which had been marketing and communications, and I made it into my side gig. So it was not for the same company, of course, but I found a client on Upwork and I did some marketing consulting for them for several months. I want to say like 5 or 6 months. And it was nice because I could still wear my like marketing and comms hat a little bit. And that
Yeah.
felt really comfortable to me. And I could make some money, and it wasn't nothing. But it was also like, I think it was maybe less than 10 hours a week. It was maybe 5 hours a week. So it was like a very small portion of my time where I could feel sort of comfortable in that space. And then that still left me, the 95 remaining percent of my time to put towards my own endeavors. So that was really nice, was to turn a little bit of my main gig into a side gig and then also get new side gigs. So I took on some photography tutoring at the time with a company that was based out of the UK. And then this was probably, almost 3 years ago, I started working with Joni Simon at the Bite Shot as well. So I'm the business support specialist at the Bite Shot. So I help people with
Oh,
business related
nice.
questions as
Yeah.
they're setting up their business or working through brand deals and things like that. So think about how you can make that main gig into your side gig. And then maybe you can also get some other side gigs in this new space that you're playing in.
That's so creative. I haven't heard anyone talk about that I've done many episodes on this
Mm,
topic, but I love that idea of taking what you've been educated in or what you've gotten training in
yeah.
and doing that on the side because we all
Yep.
have something
Totally.
that we could do. We tend to think like, oh, I need to be on an ad network and that's it. That's my
Mm.
only way. But that's not the only way.
No, and Upwork is a great platform. Fiverr is also pretty great. It's super easy to use. I believe they're free, or at least there's like a free version of it. And you can basically just pitch yourself to jobs that have already been posted. So it can be literally anything. If you want to do some if you're a teacher and you want to tutor some students, like 100% you could find work doing that. Or you could, there's copywriting jobs, there's all kinds of things that you can do more or less on an hourly basis. And you can choose like how much or how little of that you want to do in your day to give you as much time as you need and want, to pursue your passion.
Yeah, I love that so much. And then once you're in the world of blogging, there are so many avenues that you can explore. You mentioned
Yes.
photography, there's
Yes.
videography, there's writing, there's, oh my gosh, we could go on and on. There's so much opportunity to serve other
Mm-hmm.
people and get your own clients in the blogging world and make money
Totally.
freelancing on so many different levels.
Totally.
So, okay, once you're in, so let's say somebody's like, okay, I'm going to take the leap. They make the plan, they get their loved ones on board, and then they're generating money. What would kind of be the next thing for them to think about?
So I would focus on creating some systems for yourself. And I did this right away. So I would say even before you're generating money, or like at least in those early days, it can be, for me it was a very drastic jump from your corporate day. Like what did your day look like, right? You were in calls, or at least for me, I was in calls all day long, calls and meetings all day long. Just talk to people all day. And then suddenly I'm at home by myself. I have no meetings. I don't talk to anybody unless I make an effort to like go to the cafe on the corner or something.
Mhm.
So it was a really big shift. And I wanted to make sure that I still had some structure. Because I'm somebody that doesn't work super well when there's like no parameters and like no pressure. It's like a
Yeah.
little too open for me. So I wanted to calendar everything. Like I will put a meeting on my calendar for anything, even if that is like this time block, I'm doing some pitching. This time block, I'm watching this course. This time block, I'm going to shoot a recipe, or I'm going to have meet up with somebody for lunch or something. Networking for sure, like get to know your local area and get lunch and coffee with local people in your space that are doing things that you think are interesting. It's just good to know others. And that also gets you out of the house, or even if you're doing it on Skype or something, gets you some kind of connection, which can be really, really powerful. So I highly recommend making meeting blocks for yourself for pretty much anything. I mean, you could put as many on there as you want. There's never going to be too many. Um, Also, definitely put a few on there that are truly business things. So, not so much now, but at least in the beginning, I would do QuickBooks weekly. So, I would look at my cash flow every week. So, I was very, very tuned into where everything was. I would also do weekly business journaling. And I would just say, here's what I did this week. Here's what worked and what didn't work. Here's what I want to explore next week, or here's some questions that I have, or something that I'm not sure about. That really helped me sort of have like a wrap up meeting, if you will, with myself once a week. And I would do it every week. It seems like a lot, but it was really, really helpful. At this point, I still do that. I do a business journaling session once a month. And I more or less still do the same stuff. I say, hey, here's what we have done in the last month. This worked. This didn't. I'm curious about this. Maybe I'll try that next. And it's really fun to look back as well and say, all right, look at the things that I've done in the last 6 months, year, however long. It's really nice to look back at that. It's a bit of a side story, but I found an old business journal entry of when I joined Mediavine, when I first got accepted to Mediavine. And of course, the level of excitement was, 10 million level of excitement. And I thought, I was like, oh, if I could make $500 this year, in the year, $500 from my blog, I was like, I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to be making it.
Yep.
I was like, that is my goal. That is my goal. And I think I made like $750 in my first month. So yes. I was just like completely blown away. And if I could go back now and tell my previous self, I'd be like, you know what, just keep doing what you're doing. But it's going to be more than $500. So.
Oh, isn't that great? Looking back, there's nothing better than looking back and seeing that what you once thought was a big win was like such a little win, and that you could accomplish and do so much more than what you set out to do.
Yeah. It is really nice to look back, and the journaling is really helpful. I think it helps just to like get it out in the moment, but it is really nice later to then sort of appreciate what you've gone through and what you've done, even if it wasn't all wins. Let's be honest, they're not all wins.
No, they're not all wins. I love the term business journaling. I've never heard anyone say that. So when you sit down to business journal, what are some questions you ask yourself?
Yeah, so right now I'm doing it monthly, but when I was doing it weekly, it's more or less the same thing. And obviously do this at whatever cadence feels good for you. But I think about, all right, what happened this week or this month? What worked, what didn't work? I sort of think about like a red light, green light situation, stop, start, continue. So it's kind of like, I'm doing these things and it's working well, so I'm going to continue those. Maybe I have a couple questions, these things are a yellow light, if you will, where I'm like, I'm not super sure about how these are going. Let's like do some more research or give it more time or whatever it needs. And then the red light would be, we've been trying this thing and it's just, we got to call it. And, next steps next week, cancel that thing or make that meeting or whatever it is. But it's nice. It sort of is like, all right, a little bit, cutthroat's not the right word, but it's kind of like you got to pick. Is it green, yellow, or red? So
it's like a determination. Am I going to keep pursuing everything that you're doing that week, which I think is great because so many things can fall through the cracks. And then months go by and we're like, oh, why am I still doing this? This isn't working. So to do that.
Or you kind of forget how long you've been doing something. And you're kind of like, oh, I only meant to try this for like 2 months. And then, oops, 8 months has gone by. And it's like, oh, yeah, this didn't really work. And I never really came back to it. And for some reason, I've been doing it for 8 months now. It's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. So,
yeah, that's really cool that you do that. And that you've continued it, even though
Yeah.
it's monthly, I think it's still important to touch base with yourself.
Yeah. And it's also where I write down my, my goals, or like, what do I want to do
Yeah.
next? So it's like, all right, well, what do I want to do next month or next week or whatever time frame? Where do I want to put my energy, which is nice. And it holds me accountable. So I like that. I like that aspect of it too.
What are some other ways to stay accountable? You talked about getting accountability from, partners,
Hmm.
spouses, parents, whatever, loved ones. How else do you find ways to just, I guess, stay on track?
So you might think I'm crazy for this, but I do an annual review.
I
I
like
literally,
it.
I literally make a presentation, like
Oh my
you can
gosh.
only take so much corporate out of the person, right? So I make, but it's a very pretty presentation. Now, it's not a corporate presentation, it's very pretty. So I make a cute little presentation at the end of the year, and I just say, all right, here's all my metrics, sort of like you would. I mean, we did this in my comms career, and it was just like, how successful was the campaign, or how successful was this launch, or something like that. And so I'm looking at, like, how did the blog do? What growth numbers did we see? We went from here to here on literally every social platform, your email list, think about any metrics that you can find, blog metrics for sure. I have a pretty intense Excel spreadsheet that my husband helped me make because he's really good at, you
Nice.
know,
Yeah.
Excel back end stuff. So I'm like, year over year, how does this look compared to, how's this May versus last May, and what was going on? And, just sort of thinking about, like, all right, if we're seeing success, why? Why are we seeing success? And if we're not seeing success, why? Same question. Just to think about, all right, so that helps you think about your stoplight. Which things are you going to stop, start, and continue based on that success? So I do an annual review for myself. Um, and I have been sharing it, actually. I have a friend who I share it with who's also in the
Oh, that's
industry.
great.
And so I take her through my business review.
Oh my
And
gosh,
it's
I
kind
love
of nice. I
it.
mean, it's a little funny and it's always like a little embarrassing, but we're friends and that's okay. And it's kind of nice just to get an outsider's perspective. Like, she's not close to my business. It's nice to get her thoughts on, like, oh, that's cool, or this is interesting, or have you thought of this?
Mm.
Which is really neat. So that's been really fun as well. So if you can find somebody to share something like that with, that's really powerful. And that could be a mentor, that could be a mastermind group, that could just be a peer who's also trying to do something similar to you. I find it's hard. I mean, I do share that sort of stuff with my husband, and he does appreciate it. He also works in
Yeah,
marketing, but he doesn't work in food space. Well, he doesn't work in the food blog space or the blogging space. So there's definitely a lot of stuff where it's like he doesn't quite get it in certain ways, which
sure.
is
Yep.
okay. But you might find that's hard if you're, like, trying to talk to your parents, for example, and say, oh, look, this is such a big deal. And if they just aren't getting it, um, that can be a bit frustrating. So if there's somebody that you can find in the realm ish of, food blogging or
Yeah,
whatever your thing is, who can sort of get it, I think that is really nice and really encouraging and valuable.
I love that you do that. That's so great. Yeah, can't take the corporate out of the girl, right?
I mean, keep
Yeah.
some of those skills.
I know, right? I mean, some of those things are truly valuable, and they're
Yeah,
in the corporate world for a reason. So why not? If it
absolutely.
is advantageous to your business, continue it. So you came from marketing, which
Hmm.
ties in to being a content creator.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of us are creative individuals. So
Hmm.
we kind of start out in some aspect being creative people and working in creative fields. I was a graphic designer for a lot of years before
Nice.
moving into food blogging and also photographer. So those skills were no brainers, like they transfer very well. So talk about that, having some sort of creative skill set that you can take into your food blogging
Yeah.
business.
I think one thing that I hear sort of often is people sort of discredit their first career. And they're like, oh, I've only been doing this for a year, or I've only been doing this for 3 years, or whatever time frame. And they sort of pretend like they didn't do anything before. And it's like, well, and what did you do before that? You were an architect for 20 years. Like, whoa, like that's huge. Or you were a teacher or whatever. Like it really doesn't matter what career you were in prior to becoming a food blogger or food creative of whatever kind. There's absolutely going to be value in that career, and there's absolutely going to be transferable skills. Even if it's something as simple as knowing how to communicate with clients. That's a
Hmm.
big one. If you're doing any kind of branded work or sponsored content or anything like that, you need to be on time. You need to be responsive. You need to know how to write useful emails. You need to know how to stick to deadlines and create, really basic stuff. But also, that basic stuff is very well what can lose you a client too. So if you're not doing those things correctly and you're creating the best content in the world, it doesn't really matter. So those sort of simple things are all really, really powerful. But if you were a teacher or a therapist or anything, I mean, think about what you know and how that can apply. Like, does that apply to your writing, or does it apply to, your understanding of your audience, like how you're understanding their needs or how you're gathering that information? Maybe you're super in tune with what your audience wants to hear and you're polling your audience every quarter or something and adjusting based on what they're looking for. And then you're creating content that addresses those very specific needs. I mean, that's going to come from a background. You didn't just wake up knowing how to do that. You gain those skills somewhere else. So there's always, always, always going to be transferable skills that you can bring to this space.
So maybe tapping into just like understanding yourself and knowing what your skills are, and
Hmm.
yeah, just leaning into them. I think even
Yeah.
something that you might discount as being not transferable might really benefit you in your blogging business.
Yeah. Or frankly, dealing with a challenging client or something like
Yeah.
that. Like, I think we've all had an experience where we've had to deal with something challenging or something that wasn't going the way that we wanted it to go. And we had to troubleshoot, or we had to sort of change tracks or something like that. Like, there's a lot of skill in there that you can apply to this field as well.
Even communication skills. You think of
Hmm.
blogging as not being a business where you have to outside of written communication, but it can be. Like you could teach, you could educate. I mean, there are so many ways to transfer any any skill that you have. So I love
Totally.
this concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about some mindset hurdles, just taking the leap from, doing this as a hobby or part time to full time, and how we question ourselves. But what about that mindset hurdle where we think we are so below our competition, we're not in that playing field, we're the new person? How do we get past that?
It's very hard. It's
Yeah.
very, I mean, you feel like the newbie, and you feel like the newbie for maybe a long time because let's say you left a career of 10 years or a career of 20 years or a career of 2 years. It doesn't matter. You still had years under your belt, right? And now you might be saying, oh, well, I've only been doing this for 1 year, or I've only been doing this for 2 years or 3 years. You kind of have this like, I'm new. So like, I can't possibly know that much because I haven't been doing it that long. That doesn't make any sense. Like, that's just not number of years in this field equates experience, but it does not equate quality of your work or your knowledge or your success. So just be very careful when you're saying, especially the word only. I know I'm harping a bit on that, but when it's like, I've only been doing this for this long, and it's like, no, that's great. Like, that's however long that is, that's awesome. And it's okay. And some people start up really fast. Some people take a longer time to start up. You go at your own pace, and that's totally okay. So it is definitely a mindset shift. Sorry.
You got it. Yep.
Got there in the end. It's a mindset shift for sure. You just have to sort of stop thinking about yourself that way. You're not the new kid on the block. You are learning for sure. We're all learning, but we're all going to be learning the whole time. And I know we'll come back to that, but never stop learning. So, and learning has nothing to do with not knowing what you're doing. That's not what that means. So it is just just something that you have to sort of put aside and say, guess what? I'm not the newbie anymore. I don't have to pretend like I'm the newbie or discredit my work in any way or lower my prices in any way or have doubts about myself. No, you know what you're doing, and you have a previous career behind you as well, where you knew what you were doing then too. So it's tough because there's no badge, there's no line, there's no
Yeah.
degree or something where it's like, okay, now you're a professional blogger.
Yeah.
There
That does
really
make
is
it hard.
no ribbon for that. So at some point you
Mhm.
just have to say, I'm here. I'm doing that. That's what I'm doing. That's who I am. When you introduce yourself to somebody that you don't know, how do you introduce yourself, kind of thing. Like, think about that. What's your elevator pitch? And really make it strong. Like, you know what you're doing. You're a food blogger, and that's cool. That's not like oh, I'm just a little food blogger.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it can be
Yeah.
that if you want it to be, but also it can be a really big thing.
Right.
So something to think about.
I think you nailed it, what you said earlier. Just that all of us are always learning. Like, I'm a newbie in so many areas that other people are skilled at. I
Totally.
mean, I've been blogging forever and I'm still a newbie in so many areas. So just getting your mind wrapped around that, like, you're
Yep.
always going to be a newbie in something, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the right to be here. We're
Totally.
all showing up as newbies in some way or another. So that in itself just transforms my thinking. Like, oh yeah, gives me confidence and like, yeah, I have a right to be in this space no matter how many years I've been doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned learning, never stop learning. So
Hmm.
talk more about that mindset.
Yeah, and I think um, you said it earlier. There's no one way to be a food blogger. There's no one way to be a food photographer or a content creator, or there's a million different ways you can do each of those things. And I think that's part of what's challenging is especially when you're starting, you're looking for a roadmap and you're saying, can someone just tell me how to do this? Like how do I get from A to B? And it's kind of like, well, you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do 19 other things. And that's all true. And you kind of have to just pick what speaks the most to you and what you think is going to really move the needle for your business and be the best fit for you. But that also means that you're going to spend a lot of time learning, and not all of it's going to be a win, and that's okay. But even as you do know your direction, like I think I feel pretty solid in my direction right now, constantly learning. And if I ever feel stale or stuck or just like I don't feel like I'm moving in the way that I want to be moving, then I just try to learn something new. And for me right now, that is ChatGPT and how to make use of that. It's like, for me, it's a very intimidating thing. It's like, I don't want to. I don't want to do this. I feel like I have to.
Yeah.
I hear people talking about it, but also whenever I do try to use it for something, it is like, wow, that was useful. That was helpful. This wasn't,
Yeah.
it didn't tell me to put super glue on my pizza. Thank goodness. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's just like, even if it's not something that's going to become a main thing for you, it's useful to know what it is, how it works, how you might apply it or not. If it could replace something that you're currently using, is this like a step up from whatever platform you're using or anything like that? Learning is so crucial, and for me, if I'm ever feeling stuck, I'm like, all right, time to learn something new. And it doesn't need to be big, it doesn't need to be a course, it doesn't need to be like a whole huge shift of direction. It could just be something small. And it could be like, you know what, this week I really want to dig into Pinterest because there's been so many changes going on and I feel like I'm out of the loop. And I want to make changes, but I don't know how. So that's just like sort of a research learning. Something pretty small and manageable can still be really powerful.
So I think what I hear you saying is that learning skills, yes, and learning things about the industry, but also just keeping your mind open
Hmm.
to new things that come up because new things pop up all the time. You mentioned AI and ChatGPT. Always. This industry is always evolving.
Yep.
So, yes, learning, but also just being willing to have an open mind about everything that pops up in our businesses.
Yeah. And I would not say I'm not the first person to jump on to whatever the latest thing is. There are people who are that and they are great at it. And I'm sure that they would recommend you do that too. That's not for me. But if something seems to have some staying power, it's worth poking around. You know, we all remember Clubhouse. We all remember so many, so many things that have sort of like, ebbed and flowed in different ways. But it's useful to know in that specific example, like what that platform was and how it worked. And are there maybe future applications for something like that? Sure. Did I spend a ton of time on it? Not really. Not sad about that. That's okay. You can't be everything everywhere all the time.
Yeah. Okay. What else do we need to know, Jess? If somebody is on the fence, they want to take the leap, but they're hesitant, is there something additionally that we haven't talked about that you just want them to hear?
I would just say you can do it. Like, I'm dead serious. You can do it. If you really want this, you can do it. There is money to be made. There are absolutely careers to be had out here in this food world. You can do it. Do not think that you are too young or too green or too whatever, too late. I don't think that's a thing. There's always, always, always going to be space. You can definitely do this.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was so fun
You're
and
so
such
welcome.
an encouraging version of this conversation.
Good.
Just like, yeah, and very actionable things that people can do when they're considering it. So thank you. And then do you have a favorite quote or additional words of inspiration to end with today?
So a quote that I keep in my notes app on my phone is a Dolly Parton quote. It's a little random, but it's find out who you are and do it on purpose. Ooh. And I love that. And I think, it's a lifelong quest to really figure out who you are. But once you do, or once you feel like you're heading in that right way, keep doing it. Like, that's what you're meant to be doing. Keep doing it. Keep trying, keep going, keep pouring fuel on that fire. I love that message, and it's one that I repeat to myself often.
Amazing. And Dolly, go Dolly.
Yeah.
I never would have attributed that to her, but that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
We'll put together a show notes page for you, Jess. If you want to go peek at those, you can head to eatblogtalk.com/This Jess Cooks. So on that note, tell everyone where they can find you, Jess.
Yeah, so my blog is www.thisjess.com. Check it out. We have tons of sourdough discard recipes ready for you. And if you want to follow on social, I'm on Instagram, TikTok. Those are probably my two primary channels, and I'm This Jess Cooks on both.
Great. Well, everyone go check Jess out on her different channels. Thanks again, Jess, for being here. And thank you for listening, food bloggers. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this topic, be sure to watch the video shown on the screen. See you next time.